The hand, cold and surprisingly strong for a woman her age, landed squarely on my stomach. I flinched, not because it hurt, but because of the familiar, sickening lurch that always accompanied Clara's touch. "Still nothing, dear?" Clara's voice, saccharine sweet with a viper's edge, dripped into the quiet living room. "That biological clock isn't just ticking, Jacqueline. It's screaming. A veritable alarm bell, wouldn't you say, Toby?" I didn't look at Toby, my husband. I didn't need to. I could feel his smirk from across the room, that little upward twitch of his lips he always got when his mother went in for the kill. He'd offer a placating, "Now, mother," but his eyes would be gleaming, agreeing with every venomous word. This time, he just chuckled, a low rumbling sound that vibrated through the floorboards of my house. "She's right, Jackie. Time's a-wastin'." That was it. The chuckle, the casual dismissal, the way he called me Jackie when he was trying to sound like one of the good old boys, instead of the man who lived, rent-free, in the house I'd bought with my own sweat and tears, years before he'd even known my name. My name is Jacqueline, by the way, and for a decade I'd been their live-in disappointment, their unpaid maid, their private chef, and the silent financier of their comfortable lives. For years, every family gathering, every quiet Tuesday night, every holiday had been punctuated by these little digs. My empty womb, my selfish career, my failure as a woman, as Toby's wife, as Clara's vessel for the grandchildren she so desperately craved. Not out of love, I suspected, but as status symbols, tiny trophies to parade before her gossiping friends. They'd sit at my table, eating the food I bought in the house I paid for, and dissect my perceived inadequacies. Clara, with her pronouncements delivered like royal decrees. Toby with his silent, smirking agreement, or worse, his active participation. "Maybe if you relaxed more, Jackie. Perhaps you should see another specialist, dear. We can't just give up." The "we" always got me, as if this was their shared burden, their noble suffering, rather than a deeply personal and often painful subject for me. But that chuckle today, it wasn't just another pinprick. It was the final hammer blow against a dam that had been cracking for years. Something inside me didn't just break, it solidified into a cold, hard, diamond-sharp resolve. I didn't say anything. I didn't scream or cry or argue, as I might have done years ago, before the fight had been slowly, systematically ground out of me. I just offered a tight, brittle smile. "Perhaps you're right, Clara. I'll think about it." She beamed, patting my stomach again, harder this time, a gesture of proprietary ownership. "That's a good girl. See, Toby, she just needs a little encouragement." Toby winked from the sofa, where he was already flicking through channels, his part in the daily ritual of my humiliation complete. "Atta girl." They mistook my silence for acquiescence, my forced smile for defeat. They'd grown so accustomed to my quiet endurance, my swallowed retorts, my weary nods. They couldn't see the shift, the final, irrevocable change in the landscape of my mind. The years of their casual cruelty hadn't crushed me. They'd forged me. Later that evening, after they'd retired to their respective rooms, Clara to the master guest suite she'd claimed as her own years ago with a dismissive wave of her hand, Toby to scroll endlessly on his phone in our shared bed, a bed I increasingly felt was only mine by legal definition. I pulled out the folder from its hiding place beneath a loose floorboard in my study. It was thick, filled with documents that Mr. Valdez, my lawyer, had meticulously prepared. Mr. Valdez, with his sharp eyes and even sharper understanding of marital asset division, especially when one party had entered the marriage with significantly more. "The house is ironclad, Jacqueline," he'd said, his voice calm and reassuring during our last meeting, just 3 days ago, in his quiet, book-lined office. "Premarital property, solely in your name. No commingling of significant funds that could muddy the waters. As for the other assets, your inheritance from your grandmother, your pre-marriage investments, they are yours, untouchable. Toby knew I owned the house when we married. He just assumed, like many do, that marriage somehow magically made it ours. Clara certainly believed it. She often referred to it as Toby's house when talking to her friends, a little slip of the tongue that used to make my blood boil, but now just added fuel to the pyre I was building. They had no idea about the separate accounts I'd maintained, the trusts I'd set up years ago, the way I'd carefully firewalled my financial life from the slow, leaching drain of their presence. They enjoyed the lifestyle, the comfortable home, the nice dinners, the vacations I paid for, blissfully unaware that their access to it all hung by the thinnest of threads, my continued tolerance. And that tolerance had just snapped, cleanly and irrevocably. I traced the line on the eviction notice Mr. Valdez had drafted, 30 days. A legally generous time frame, he'd called it. Personally, I felt it was 29 days too many, but I would follow the letter of the law. It made the victory cleaner. They thought my silence was submission. They had no idea it was the calm before I unleashed a hurricane they'd built themselves. 1 more week. That's all I'd give them. 1 more week of their smug pronouncements and oblivious entitlement. Then, the storm would break, and I would be the one holding the lightning. The early days with Toby felt like a dream, a sun-drenched landscape, after years of focusing solely on my career, on building something for myself. He was charming, attentive, and made me laugh. My house, the one I'd poured my savings and my soul into, felt warmer with him in it. Clara, his mother, was introduced gradually. First, it was Sunday dinners, then extended holiday stays. "She's just a bit lonely since Dad passed," Toby would say, his arm around my shoulder, his eyes pleading. How could I say no? Slowly, insidiously, her visits became permanent. Her belongings appeared in the guest room, then spread. Her opinions, always freely given, started to dominate our conversations, our choices, our lives. The pressure for an heir began subtly, a wistful sigh here, a comment about a friend's grandchild there. Then it escalated. My career, once a source of pride for Toby, or so he'd claimed, became an obstacle. "Maybe if you weren't so stressed with work, Jackie," he'd muse, echoing Clara's more direct pronouncements. The gaslighting was an art form. "You're too sensitive, Jacqueline. Mother doesn't mean it that way. You're imagining things." My reality was constantly questioned, my feelings invalidated, until I started to doubt my own sanity. Was I the problem? Was I truly selfish, ungrateful, cold? But a part of me, the part that had fought to buy this house on my own, the part that had built a successful business from scratch, knew better. It was that part that led me to Mr. Valdez's office 6 months ago, not for a divorce initially, but for clarity. "I just need to understand my rights, my position," I'd told him, feeling like a traitor even as I spoke. He listened patiently, then laid out the facts. My foresight in keeping my finances separate, in ensuring the house title was never altered, had been my salvation. "You've built a fortress, Jacqueline," he'd said, a rare smile touching his lips. "And you hold all the keys." Over the following months, we strategized. We reviewed every document, every account. The passive income streams Toby and Clara so blithely enjoyed, dividends from investments I'd made long before Toby, rental income from a small property my grandmother left me, were all legally mine to control. He helped me draft the paperwork to redirect those funds, to secure my digital assets, to change beneficiaries on policies they didn't even know existed. Each signature was a quiet act of rebellion, a nail in the coffin of their entitlement. Last night, after the screaming biological clock incident, I called Desiree. She's been my rock, The one person who saw through Toby's charm from day one and never minced words about Clara. He chuckled. Desiree's voice was incredulous. After she said that? Oh, honey, it's time. Past time. The papers are ready, I said, my voice low. Mr. Valdez says it's all in order. Good. You deserve to live in your own house without being treated like an incubator with a faulty switch. You're strong. You are, Jacqueline. Desiree's voice was firm, a lifeline in the churning sea of my emotions. You built an empire while they were busy trying to tear you down. Don't you dare forget that. I won't, I promised, and for the first time in a long time, the words felt true, not just a hopeful whisper. Thank you, Des, for everything. Always. Now go get 'em, and call me the second those eviction notices are served. I want a play-by-play. I laughed, a genuine laugh that startled me. You'll be the first to know. Hanging up, I walked through my silent house. My house. The polished wood floors, the artwork I'd carefully chosen, the garden I'd lovingly tended before Clara decided my roses were too thorny, and my herbs attracted pests. Every inch of it was mine, bought and paid for long before Toby had even learned to spell my name correctly. I remembered those early days, his easy smile, the way he'd look at me like I was the only woman in the world. He'd been so impressed by my drive, or so he'd said. You're incredible, Jackie, he'd murmur, tracing patterns on my arm. So smart, so successful. It was intoxicating. Clara, when she first started her extended stays, was all compliments too. Such a lovely home, dear. Toby is so lucky to have found you. The shift was so gradual, I almost didn't notice it. Like a tide slowly turning, her presence became a constant. Her things migrated from the guest room to the main living areas. Her pronouncements on how we should live, what we should do, became more frequent, more insistent. Toby, my charming Toby, began to defer to her. Mother knows best, he'd say with a shrug, avoiding my eyes. The gaslighting was the worst. I remembered one evening, early on, when Clara had openly criticized a business decision I'd made, one that had actually been quite profitable. A bit reckless, don't you think, dear? Toby needs stability, not gambles. It wasn't a gamble, Clara, I'd said, trying to keep my voice even. It was a calculated risk, and it paid off. Oh, don't be defensive, Jacqueline, she'd replied, her tone pitying. We just worry about you, about Toby's future. Later, when I'd tried to talk to Toby about it, he'd sighed. You're overreacting, Jackie. Mum's just old-fashioned. She means well. Why do you always have to take things so personally? That was their refrain. You're too sensitive. You're imagining things. You're twisting our words. It was a slow erosion of my confidence, my reality. For a while, I'd even started to believe them. Maybe I was the problem, but the numbers didn't lie. The bank statements, the property deeds, the investment portfolios, they told a different story. A story of my hard work, my prudence, my success. And Mr. Valdez had helped me read that story clearly again. The next morning, while Toby and Clara were still asleep, they usually surfaced around 10, expecting breakfast to be ready. I was on a secure video call with Mr. Valdez. All the transfer authorizations for the dividend accounts are confirmed, Jacqueline, he said, his image crisp on my laptop screen. Effective immediately, all passive income will be redirected to your sole private accounts, the ones they are unaware of. And the joint checking account? I asked. That was the account my salary went into, the one Toby used for his allowance, and from which Clara often requested funds for her little necessities. As per our strategy, you've been meticulously documenting your contributions versus his withdrawals. Once you deposit your next paycheck into your new private account, the joint one will effectively contain only what minimal funds he might have contributed over the years, if any. You are within your rights to withdraw your documented contributions, which will leave it practically empty, I stated, a grim satisfaction settling in. Precisely. We went over the final details for the serving of the notices. A registered process server. No room for them to claim they hadn't received them. We confirmed the wording on the notice for Clara as an unauthorized long-term occupant with no tenancy rights. They will be shocked, Mr. Valdez said, a master of understatement. They will likely become emotional, perhaps aggressive. Are you prepared? I thought of Clara's hand on my stomach. Toby's smirk. More than prepared, Mr. Valdez. I'm ready. Good. Remember, you have the law, and the truth, on your side. After the call, I made coffee, the aroma filling my kitchen. I looked at the calendar. 5 more days until the notices would be printed, signed by me in Mr. Valdez's office, and handed to the process server. 5 more days of playing the dutiful, slightly downtrodden wife. Every "I love you" Toby had ever uttered now felt like a prelude to a demand. Every gift a down payment on my servitude. His charm was a currency he'd used to buy my compliance, my resources, my life. Clara's concern was a cloak for her manipulations, her desire for control. Mr. Valdez assured me all my ducks were in a row. The only question left was, when would I let them fly? The answer was, very, very soon. And they wouldn't see it coming until the sky fell on their heads. The week crawled by with agonizing slowness, each day a fresh exercise in biting my tongue and steeling my nerves. Toby and Clara, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering just over their horizon, continued their reign of casual tyranny. Clara critiqued my cooking. A little bland tonight, Jacqueline, don't you think? My choice of television programs, must we watch these dreary documentaries? And of course, my continued failure to produce an heir. Toby, as usual, played his supporting role, offering placid agreement to his mother and occasional, patronizing advice to me. You know, Jackie, he said one evening as I was clearing away the dinner plates. They're dinner plates from a meal I'd planned, shopped for and cooked. Mother was talking to Angelina today. Angelina was Toby's aunt, a woman whose primary skill seemed to be stirring pots and spreading gossip. Angelina knows this wonderful fertility specialist. Apparently, she works miracles. Maybe you should consider it. We're not getting any younger. He said it so casually, as if discussing the weather, his eyes already drifting back to the sports highlights on his phone. He didn't see the way my fingers tightened on the edge of the plate, the way my jaw clenched. He didn't see the ice forming in my gaze. The Last Supper, as I'd morbidly dubbed it in my head, was scheduled for Friday night. Clara had insisted on inviting Angelina over. A proper family dinner, she'd declared. We need to discuss some important family matters. I knew what that meant. Another coordinated assault on my reproductive system. Another evening of being lectured and pitied. I almost declined, almost feigned a headache. But then I thought, no. Let them have their moment. Let them gorge on their own arrogance one last time. It would make the coming shock all the more potent, so I played the part. I smiled wanly. I nodded at appropriate intervals. I even managed to look suitably contrite when Clara launched into her familiar speech about a woman's true calling. It's not about careers, Jacqueline, she intoned, her fork gesturing emphatically, narrowly missing a splatter of gravy on my clean tablecloth. It's about legacy, about family, about giving your husband a child to carry on his name. Toby nodded sagely beside her. She's right, you know. A man needs an heir. Angelina, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of pity and relish, chimed in. And you're not getting any younger, dear. My friend's daughter, she waited too long, and now, well, it's just terribly sad. She patted my hand, her touch lingering a moment too long, as if searching for a pulse, or perhaps a flicker of maternal instinct. I focused on a spot just over Clara's shoulder, a small water stain on the ceiling I'd been meaning to fix. I let their words wash over me, a meaningless drone. Inside, I was counting down the hours. Mr. Valdez's office had confirmed. The notices were printed, signed, sealed. Monday morning, the process server would deliver them. I watched them. Clara, puffed up with self-importance. Toby, smug and complacent. Angelina, soaking it all in, no doubt already composing the next chapter of her gossip column. They were so sure of themselves, so secure in their positions, so utterly oblivious to the ground crumbling beneath their feet. I even managed a weak smile when Clara said, "Don't worry, dear, maybe next year we'll have baby news." My smile widened, just a fraction, a secret satisfaction playing at the corners of my lips. Little did she know, the only news arriving next week would be delivered by registered mail, and it wouldn't be about a baby. It would be about an eviction, and the only thing screaming wouldn't be my biological clock, but them. Monday morning dawned bright and clear, a painfully beautiful day for the demolition I was about to unleash. I'd taken the day off work, a personal day. I'd told my office. Toby and Clara were, as usual, late risers. I sat in the kitchen, sipping coffee. The silence of the house a stark contrast to the turmoil in my chest. It wasn't fear, not anymore. It was a strange, thrumming anticipation, like the moment before a starting gunfires. The doorbell rang at precisely 10:30 a.m., just as Mr. Valdez had predicted. I heard the thud of Toby's feet on the stairs, then Clara's sharper, quicker steps from her suite. "I'll get it," Toby called out, his voice still thick with sleep. I remained seated at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around my mug. I could hear the murmur of voices at the front door, Toby's initial confusion, then a note of irritation. "Registered mail? For me? And for Clara Hoffman?" His voice rose in pitch. "What is this?" A moment later, he walked into the kitchen, 2 official-looking envelopes in his hand. Clara trailed behind him, her silk dressing gown flowing, her expression one of regal curiosity. "What is it, Toby?" she asked, peering at the envelopes. "Something from the bank?" Toby tore his open first, his brow furrowed. He scanned the first page, then the second. His face, already pale from sleep, began to lose even more color. He looked up at me, his mouth slightly agape. "Jacqueline, what is this? Is this some kind of joke?" He tried to laugh, a strangled, unconvincing sound. "A very bad joke." Clara, impatient, snatched her envelope from his unresisting fingers and ripped it open. Her eyes, usually so sharp and critical, widened as she read. The color drained from her face too, leaving it a mottled, papery white. "Eviction notice?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Then, louder, shriller. "Eviction notice. What is the meaning of this, Jacqueline? Have you lost your mind?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "No, Clara," I said, my voice remarkably calm. "I haven't lost my mind. I found it. Those notices are perfectly legal, and they are final. You both have 30 days to vacate the premises." Toby stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Vacate? Jacqueline, this is our home. You can't just kick us out." Clara crumpled onto a kitchen chair, her hand pressed to her chest. "Our home. The home my son provided for you." "Actually, Clara," I said, setting my mug down with a deliberate click, "this has always been my home. I bought it, I paid for it, and it is solely in my name. Toby has been living here as my husband, and you, well, you've been living here as his mother." Toby lunged forward then, his face contorted with a mixture of fury and panic. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. "You can't do this, Jacqueline. This is our home." I pulled my arm away, a cold disgust washing over me. "No, Toby," I said, my voice as hard as the granite countertops. It was always my home. And your time here is up. His face went from red to a ghastly white. Clara started to wail, a high-pitched, theatrical sound. This was just the beginning, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that they wouldn't go quietly. The initial shockwave of the eviction notices quickly morphed into a predictable storm of manipulation and outrage. Toby, after his initial white-faced horror, swung wildly between desperate apologies and outright threats. "Jackie, baby, please," he'd plead, trying to take my hands, his eyes wide and earnest, in a way I hadn't seen since our earliest days. "We can work this out. I know I haven't been the best husband lately, but I love you. We can go to counseling. We can do anything you want." When I didn't melt, when I simply reiterated that the decision was final, his tone would shift. "You're really going to do this? After everything? What will people think, Jacqueline? Our friends? Our family? You'll be a laughingstock, throwing your husband out on the street." "My true friends will understand, Toby," I replied, my voice even. And frankly, I stopped caring what people think a long time ago, mostly thanks to you and your mother. Clara, meanwhile, launched her own offensive. Her wails of disbelief turned into a full-blown campaign to paint me as a cruel, unhinged shrew. Her phone became practically glued to her ear. "Angelina, you won't believe what she's done!" I heard her screeching from her room, the door pointedly left ajar. "Thrown us out! After all we've done for her! She's clearly had some sort of breakdown. You must tell everyone!" Poor Toby, he's devastated. I half expected a delegation of concerned, gossiping relatives to appear on my doorstep. To preempt any further drama within the house, and to make a very clear point, I waited until they both left one afternoon, Toby to clear his head and Clara to undoubtedly rally more troops, and called a locksmith. The new deadbolts and reinforced locks gleamed with a satisfying finality. When they returned, their keys no longer worked. Toby rattled the doorknob, then banged his fist against the wood. "Jacqueline! Open this door! What the hell is this?" I opened it a crack, the security chain still in place. "I've changed the locks, Toby. For my peace of mind, you'll be given supervised access to collect your belongings at an agreed-upon time." His face was puce. "Supervised access? To my own home?" "It's not your home anymore, Toby." The notice was clear. It was during one of these increasingly fraught confrontations, with Clara hovering in the background muttering about my wickedness, that Toby's carefully constructed facade finally shattered, revealing something far uglier beneath. "You can't just lock me out!" Toby yelled, his voice cracking. He rattled the doorknob again, a useless, angry gesture. "I live here. This is my stuff is in there. And you'll get your stuff, Toby," I said, my voice calm through the small gap allowed by the security chain. "As I said, at an agreed-upon time, with supervision." Clara, who had been hovering behind him like a malevolent shadow, pushed forward. "Jacqueline, this is inhuman. He's your husband. You're treating him like a criminal." "Am I, Clara?" I met her furious gaze. "Or am I finally treating myself like someone who deserves peace in her own home?" Toby backed away from the door, running his hands through his hair. He looked genuinely panicked now, the entitled anger giving way to a raw animal fear. Okay, Jackie. Look, I get it. You're angry. You have every right to be. I messed up. We messed up." He shot a quick, almost accusatory glance at his mother, who huffed. "But this is too much. You're destroying everything." "What exactly am I destroying, Toby?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Our blissful marriage? Your mother's retirement plan?" He flinched. "Don't be like that. I'm talking about our future. My future. What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? You know I don't have... Everything's tied up with you, with this house. An unfortunate oversight on your part, perhaps, I said. But not my problem to solve anymore. Not your problem? He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Of course it's your problem. You're my wife. You're supposed to support me. Not financially castrate me. The phrase hung in the air, ugly and revealing. Clara gasped, a theatrical hand flying to her mouth, but her eyes were sharp, watching my reaction. Financially castrate you? I repeated slowly, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Is that what this is about, Toby? Not just the lack of an heir, but the lack of access to my money if there's no child to secure your legacy? His face went crimson. He opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly realizing he'd said too much. He looked trapped. No, that's not. I just mean, a man is supposed to provide, and you've always had everything, and you've always had access to it. I finished for him. The cars, the holidays, the generous allowance from our joint account that was funded almost entirely by my salary. The comfortable life in my house, with no mortgage payments or property taxes to worry your pretty little head about. I contributed, he sputtered. I managed the household finances. You mean you spent my money, I corrected. And now that the tap is being turned off, you're panicking. Clara chose that moment to intervene, her voice dripping with venom. How dare you speak to my son that way? After all he's given up for you, he could have married anyone. Someone who would have appreciated him, given him a proper family. Given him a blank check, you mean? I shot back, my gaze fixed on Toby. He wasn't just counting on an heir to carry on the Hoffman name, was he? He was counting on an heir to ensure continued access to my assets. An heir would have tied me to him, to you both, indefinitely. An heir would have been his insurance policy. Toby looked like I'd slapped him. He deflated, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a sullen, resentful understanding that I finally saw him for what he truly was. A parasite. You always resented my success, didn't you? I pressed. The years of subtle digs, of undermining comments, suddenly making perfect, horrifying sense. It wasn't just about me not being a proper wife. It was about control. My money gave me independence, and you couldn't stand that. A baby, your baby, would have been your leverage. He didn't deny it. He just stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped. Clara, however, was far from defeated. You twisted, ungrateful girl, she shrieked, her face contorted with rage. You're trying to destroy him. He loves you. And this is how you repay him? By throwing him out like trash? By accusing him of these horrible things? Are they horrible, Clara? I asked, my voice like ice. Or are they just true? Did you know, Toby? Did you know he'd racked up significant personal debts? Debts he clearly expected me, or my failure, to produce an heir who could inherit my money, to eventually cover. Toby's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a new kind of fear, the kind that comes from a hidden secret being dragged into the light. How did you know about that? It doesn't matter how I know, I said. What matters is that I do. And it makes all of this, I gestured vaguely between him and his mother, makes so much more sense. The pressure, the manipulation, the constant focus on my empty womb. It wasn't just about your desire for a grandchild, Clara. It was about securing Toby's financial future, wasn't it? Through me, and through any child I might have. Clara's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. For once she seemed genuinely speechless, her carefully constructed image of the concerned mother and mother-in-law shattering around her. Toby just looked broken. You planned this, he whispered, a dawning, horrified understanding in his eyes. You planned all of this. I planned to protect myself, Toby, I said. something I should have done a long time ago. I looked from his defeated face to Clara's stunned one. So, it wasn't just about an heir, was it, Toby? It was about a blank check. My supposed failure was a threat to your little financial fantasy. He looked like I'd slapped him. Clara, finally finding her voice, started wailing, a theatrical, piercing sound. "She's destroying my son, my poor boy. What did he ever do to deserve such cruelty?" The performance was almost enough to make me laugh. Almost. Clara's wails were a soundtrack to the next few days. They were theatrical, designed for maximum impact, and usually timed for when I was within earshot or when she was on the phone, presumably regaling Angelina or some other unfortunate soul with tales of my monstrous behavior. Toby, on the other hand, retreated into a sullen silence, punctuated by occasional desperate attempts to reason with me, which quickly devolved into bitter accusations when he realized I wasn't budging. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he snarled one morning, finding me calmly drinking coffee in the kitchen while he paced like a caged animal. He hadn't slept in the house since I'd changed the locks, opting instead for a friend's sofa. Peyton, I think he'd said, though I doubted Peyton was getting the full, unvarnished truth. "Enjoying what, Toby?" I asked, not looking up from my newspaper. "The peace and quiet?" "Yes, immensely." "Don't be sarcastic, Jacqueline. You know what I mean. You're enjoying watching us suffer." "I'm not watching you do anything, Toby. I'm simply reclaiming what's mine. Your suffering, as you call it, is a consequence of your own actions, and frankly, your mother's." He scoffed. "My mother? What did she ever do but love you, try to guide you?" I finally lowered the paper and met his gaze. "Your mother systematically undermined me for a decade, Toby. She treated me like an incubator, a disappointment, and a walking bank account. And you stood by and let her. No, you encouraged her." He had no answer to that, just a tightening of his jaw. The eviction deadline was looming, just over 2 weeks left, and their desperation was becoming palpable. Clara, realizing her phone campaign wasn't yielding the desired results, no angry mob had stormed my gates, no family intervention had been staged, escalated her tactics. She started by refusing to pack. Her belongings remained exactly where they were, a silent, stubborn protest. Then came the dramatic sighs, the strategically placed coughs, the clutching of her chest whenever I entered a room. I ignored it all, continuing with my routine, my calm a stark contrast to her escalating theatrics. One afternoon, I came home from a meeting with Mr. Valdez. We were preparing for potential last-minute legal challenges, though he doubted they had a leg to stand on, to find Clara sprawled at the bottom of the main staircase. "Mother!" Toby, who must have just arrived, was kneeling beside her, his face a mask of panic. "What happened? Are you okay?" Clara moaned, a low, pitiful sound. "My leg. I think it's broken. I fell. The stress. Jacqueline, this stress you're putting us under. It's too much for an old woman." Her eyes, when they flickered towards me, held a glint of triumph. I didn't rush to her side. I didn't gasp in horror. I simply pulled out my phone. "Don't move, Clara. Toby, step back. I'm calling an ambulance." "An ambulance?" Toby looked up, surprised. "Maybe we should just help her to the sofa." "No," I said firmly. "If she's fallen and potentially broken something, moving her is the worst thing we could do. We need professionals." Clara's moans intensified. "Oh, the pain. Jacqueline, how could you be so cold?" I ignored her, calmly speaking to the emergency dispatcher, giving our address and a brief description of the situation. Mr. Valdez had warned me about this exact tactic. "Desperate people do desperate things, Jacqueline," he'd said. "Faking an injury to delay eviction or garner sympathy is a classic. Document everything. Call official channels." While we waited, Toby fussed over Clara. shooting me accusatory glances. "She could be seriously hurt, Jacqueline. And all you can do is stand there. I'm ensuring she gets proper medical attention, Toby. What would you prefer I do? Risk further injury by trying to move her myself?" The paramedics arrived quickly, their calm professionalism a welcome antidote to Clara's histrionics. They gently examined her, asking questions, their faces impassive. Clara put on a brave performance, wincing and groaning at every touch, describing her agonizing pain in vivid detail. "I just felt so dizzy," she explained, her voice weak. "All this worry about where we'll go, what will become of us. It's all Jacqueline's doing." One of the paramedics, a kind-faced woman, palpated Clara's leg carefully. "Can you tell me where it hurts most, ma'am?" Clara pointed vaguely to her shin. "All of it. It's throbbing." After a thorough examination, including checking her range of motion and vital signs, the paramedics exchanged a subtle glance. The kind-faced one straightened up. "Ma'am," she said, her voice gentle but firm, addressing Clara directly. "Your vitals are perfectly stable. There's no visible swelling or deformity in your leg, and you have full range of motion, even if it's a bit tender to the touch. I don't believe anything is broken." Clara's face crumpled. Not in pain, but in the dawning, public horror of being caught in a blatant lie. Her eyes darted from the paramedic to me, then to Toby, who looked utterly bewildered, then increasingly mortified. But I fell," Clara stammered, her voice losing its frail quaver. "I felt a sharp pain." "You might have twisted it slightly, or bruised it," the paramedic conceded. "But it doesn't appear to be a serious injury requiring emergency transport. We'd recommend you see your own doctor, if the pain persists." She then turned to me. "Will she be all right here?" "She will be," I said, my voice neutral. "Thank you for coming so quickly." As the paramedics packed up their equipment and left, a heavy silence descended. Toby stared at his mother, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning shame. Clara refused to meet his eyes, or mine. She looked small, deflated, her grand performance exposed as a cheap charade. Their last card, the one played with such dramatic flair, had just been declined, and the eviction date loomed ever closer. The air in the house grew heavier, thick with unspoken accusations and the bitter taste of their desperation. The failed fall seemed to take the last bit of fight out of Clara, at least for a while. She retreated into a sulky silence, spending most of her time in her room, the door firmly closed. The dramatic wails ceased, replaced by an atmosphere of resentful capitulation. Toby, however, seemed to oscillate between a kind of bewildered despair and flashes of his old manipulative charm, as if hoping one last plea might change my mind. "Jackie, can we just talk?" he asked one evening, a few days before the eviction deadline. He'd been let in to pack some personal items under my watchful eye. He sat on the edge of what used to be our bed, surrounded by half-filled boxes. No fighting, no blaming. Just talk. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "What is there to talk about, Toby? The court order is clear. You have until Friday." I know, he sighed, running a hand over his tired face. "But this is my life you're dismantling. Our life. Our life, Toby, was built on a foundation of lies and your family's entitlement. I'm just clearing away the debris." He winced. "Okay, maybe I deserved that. Maybe we deserved some of it. But all of it? Are you really going to leave me with nothing?" "Nothing?" I raised an eyebrow. "You have your clothes, your personal effects. You have your... well, whatever you had before you met me." His eyes flashed with a familiar resentment. "You know I put everything into this marriage, into us." "Did you, Toby? Or did you just comfortably settle into my life, my house, my finances, and assume it would last forever, no matter how badly you and your mother treated me? He looked away, fiddling with a cufflink he'd pulled from a box. I don't understand why you're being so ruthless about it. The money, Jackie. You're really going to strip me bare? And there it was again. The money. Always the money. Let's be very clear, Toby, I said, my voice cold. The money you're referring to is my money. Money I earned. Money I inherited. Money I invested wisely, long before you were in the picture. The fact that you benefited from it for a decade was a privilege, not a right, and that privilege has been revoked. He stood up, pacing the small space between the bed and the boxes. But the joint accounts, you can't just empty them. That's theft. Actually, it's not, I replied calmly. Mr. Valdez and I have been very meticulous. Every penny I contributed to those accounts has been documented. Every penny I withdrew is accounted for. What's left is, shall we say, reflective of your own contributions over the years. I paused, letting that sink in. Which, as you know, amounts to very little. His face paled. He knew his own financial input into our shared life had been negligible, often non-existent. His management of the household finances had mostly involved spending my income. So, all those years I supported your career, he began, his voice rising, all the sacrifices I made. Sacrifices? I cut him off, a humorless laugh escaping me. What sacrifices, Toby? Did you sacrifice your high-powered job? Oh, wait, you didn't have one. Did you sacrifice your own ambitions to support mine? Or did you just enjoy the fruits of my labor while complaining I wasn't home enough to cater to your needs and your mother's demands? He stopped pacing, his fists clenched. You know, I had opportunities. Before you. I could have what, Toby? Found another successful woman to leech off of? The words were out before I could stop them, sharp and brutal. He recoiled as if struck. That's not fair, Jacqueline. Isn't it? Think about it. Your debts, the ones you so conveniently forgot to mention to me, how are you planning to pay those off? Was I supposed to be your bailout plan? Was our non-existent child supposed to be the key to unlocking more of my funds? He stared at me, his eyes wide, a cornered animal. The truth of it, the raw, unvarnished truth of his parasitic existence, was laid bare between us. And what about the little distraction you had last year? I added, playing a card I'd been holding on to, a piece of information Desiree had reluctantly passed on from a mutual acquaintance. The one you thought I didn't know about? Was she part of your grand plan too? Or just a way to spend more of my money while complaining about how unfulfilled you were in our marriage? His jaw dropped. The color drained completely from his face, leaving it a sickly gray. Who told you? Does it matter? It just adds another layer to the deceit, doesn't it, Toby? Another reason why this, I gestured around the room, at the boxes, at the remnants of our shared life, is not just necessary, but long overdue. He sank back onto the bed, defeated. The fight was gone, replaced by a hollow understanding of just how thoroughly I had outmaneuvered him, how completely I had seen through his charade. Clara, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, appeared in the doorway. She'd clearly been listening. Her face was a mask of fury, but also a strange, dawning fear. She looked from Toby's devastated face to mine, her eyes narrowed. You knew all this? She whispered, her voice raspy. You knew about his troubles? I know a lot of things, Clara, I said, my gaze unwavering. Things you both thought I was too stupid or too browbeaten to ever figure out. The movers I'd hired were due the next morning. Mr. Valdez had arranged for a small, cheap storage unit, 1 month prepaid. just enough to get their things out of my house. Their expressions, as they finally seemed to grasp the full extent of their impending financial and domestic annihilation, were a study in disbelief. The comfortable world they had built for themselves, on my foundation, was about to come crashing down. And I would be the one to push the plunger. Eviction day arrived with the kind of grey, drizzly sky that perfectly matched the mood inside the house, at least their mood. Mine was one of grim, resolute anticipation. The movers, a team of 3 burly men in matching blue overalls, rang the doorbell at precisely 9 a.m. I'd already had my coffee, and Mr. Valdez was on speed dial, though I hoped his intervention wouldn't be necessary. Toby answered the door, his eyes red-rimmed and puffy. He looked like he hadn't slept. Clara stood behind him, a tragic empress surveying the sack of her kingdom, her arms crossed tightly, her lips a thin, furious line. "They're here," Toby said unnecessarily, his voice flat. "Yes, they are," I replied, stepping forward. "Good morning, gentlemen. Please come in. The items to be moved are clearly marked." I'd spent the previous evening going through the house, tagging everything that belonged to Toby and Clara with bright yellow stickers. There was surprisingly little that was unequivocally theirs, aside from clothes and personal knickknacks. Most of the furniture, the artwork, the appliances, they were mine. The movers, professional and efficient, got to work immediately. The sight of her cherished porcelain figurines being carefully wrapped in bubble wrap and placed in a box seemed to finally galvanize Clara. "You can't take those!" she shrieked, lunging for a box. "My mother gave me that shepherdess." One of the movers, a large man with a patient expression, gently intercepted her. "Ma'am, if it's got a yellow sticker, it goes. Orders." "But it's mine," Clara insisted, her voice rising. "This is theft, outright thievery." "Clara," I said, my voice cutting through her tirade. "Those figurines were a gift to me, from you, for our 5th anniversary. Do you not recall? You said they would look lovely on my mantelpiece." Which they had, until she'd decided the mantelpiece was a better showcase for her own collection of silver-framed photographs of Toby as a child. She stared at me, momentarily speechless, then her face contorted. "You are a vindictive, cold-hearted—" "Save it, Clara," I said wearily. "The movers have a schedule." As their belongings were systematically removed from the rooms they had occupied for so long, the house began to feel lighter, airier. It was as if a physical weight was being lifted. Toby watched in silence, his shoulders slumped, occasionally directing the movers to a specific item of his with a defeated sigh. Then came the moment for the financial coup de grace. I'd waited for this. As the last few boxes were being carried out, I approached Toby and Clara, who were huddled near the front door like refugees. "Before you leave," I said, holding out a sheaf of papers, "I think you should see these." Toby took them reluctantly. Clara peered over his shoulder. They were bank statements, investment summaries, trust fund reports, all solely in my name, all meticulously organized by Mr. Valdez. Accounts they had never known existed. Wealth they had never suspected I possessed, beyond the comfortable lifestyle I provided. What is all this?" Toby stammered, his eyes scanning the figures, growing wider with each page. "That, Toby," I said, "is my financial portfolio. The one I built before I met you. The one that has been quietly growing, independent of you, for many years. The one that funded this house, our vacations, your allowance, and your mother's extended, all-expenses-paid stay." Clara snatched a page from Toby's hand, her eyes darting across the numbers. A choked sound escaped her. This can't be right. This much?" "Oh, it's right," I assured them. "And as of last week, the passive income you both so enjoyed, the dividends, the rental payments that mysteriously appeared in the joint account, has been redirected to my private accounts, the ones you see listed there." Toby looked up, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. So, the joint account, it's really empty? I finished for him. Or near enough, containing only the paltry sums you occasionally deposited from your freelance projects, was it? His attempts at earning his own money had always been sporadic and largely unsuccessful. But my debts, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I was counting on... You thought I'd bail you out? I shook my head. Or that our non-existent child would inherit enough to cover your mistakes. Bad planning, Toby. Very bad planning. I paused, then delivered the final blow. And as for the small gambling problem you developed last year, the one you thought I wouldn't discover, consider any remaining funds in that joint account a very small and entirely insufficient contribution towards settling those particular obligations. You're on your own with the rest. His face crumpled. He looked utterly destroyed. Clara swayed, and for a moment I thought she might actually faint this time. The movers were now waiting by their truck, the last of the boxes loaded. The storage unit is prepaid for 1 month, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. It's a 10 by 10. Should be ample space for... this. I gestured to the meager pile of their possessions on the curb, looking small and insignificant against the backdrop of my large, now blessedly empty house. Consider this your severance package, I told them, my voice ringing with a finality that echoed in the sudden quiet. For years of service in trying to break my spirit. You failed. I stepped back inside and closed the front door. The click of the lock was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I leaned against it, a wave of exhaustion and elation washing over me. The silence in the house was profound, beautiful. But I knew, even then, that the echoes of their ruin were just beginning. They had built their comfortable cage around me, and I had just handed them the keys to their own, much smaller, much bleaker one. The silence that followed their departure was a physical presence. It settled into the corners of the rooms, draped itself over the furniture that remained, my furniture, and filled the spaces where their voices, their demands, their constant grating presence had been. For the first hour, I just walked from room to room, touching things, breathing deeply. It felt like my house was breathing again too, sighing in relief. I opened windows, letting the cool, damp air chase out the stale energy of their occupation. The scent of rain and wet earth filled the living room, a clean, honest smell. Clara's cloying perfumes and Toby's musky cologne were finally fading. Desiree called around noon. "Well," she demanded, no preamble. "Are the vultures airborne? Has the nest been fumigated?" I laughed, a real, unrestrained laugh that echoed through the newly empty hallway. "The vultures have flown, Des, or rather, been gently but firmly nudged out of the nest and into a rather cramped, prepaid cage. Details. I need glorious, gory details." "So," I told her. I described the movers, Clara's sputtering outrage over the porcelain shepherdess, Toby's dawning horror as he realized the true extent of his financial ruin. I recounted the presentation of the bank statements, the revelation of the redirected income, the final crushing mention of his gambling debts and the affair. Desiree listened, interjecting with appropriate gasps, snorts of derision, and occasional cheers. "Oh, honey, that's not just revenge, that's a masterpiece, a symphony of karmic retribution. Severance package, I'm dying. You actually said that?" "I did," I admitted, a smile playing on my lips. It felt appropriate. Appropriate. It was epic. So, what now? Champagne? A ceremonial burning of their remaining possessions? Please say yes to the burning. I'll bring marshmallows. "Champagne, definitely," I said. "Burning, tempting, but I think the sight of their stuff crammed into that tiny storage unit is punishment enough for now." Later that day, after a long hot bath in my tub, undisturbed, I wandered into what had been Clara's suite. It was bare, stripped of her fussy lace and overstuffed cushions. The only thing left was a faint indentation on the carpet, where her vanity table had stood for years. A ghost of her presence. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even pity. Just a profound sense of space. The next few weeks were a blur of reclaiming. I rearranged furniture. I bought new linens in colours I liked. I filled the house with flowers, roses, thorns, and all. I played my music, loud. I cooked what I wanted, when I wanted, or ordered takeout and ate it straight from the carton on my sofa, something Clara would have had a conniption over. The calls started trickling in after about a week. First, a hesitant Peyton, Toby's friend. "Jacqueline, it's Peyton. Listen, Toby's in a bit of a state. He's been crashing on my couch and, well, he's not taking things well." "I imagine not," I said calmly. "Yeah. Look, I'm not taking sides, but he's saying some pretty wild stuff. About you taking all his money, throwing him out with nothing." "Peyton," I interrupted, "did Toby ever mention to you the significant personal debts he was hiding? Or the fact that the house and most of the assets he enjoyed were mine long before he came along? Or his little gambling habit?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. No. No, he didn't mention any of that." "Then perhaps you're not getting the full story," I said. "Toby is facing the consequences of his own choices. I wish him well in dealing with them." From a distance. Peyton sounded subdued after that. "Right. Okay. Well, take care, Jacqueline." He clearly wanted no part of the drama once he sensed Toby wasn't the innocent victim he was portraying. Then Angelina called, her voice oozing false sympathy. "Jacqueline, dear, I was so shocked to hear. Clara is beside herself. They're staying in that dreadful little bedsit Toby found. Can you imagine? After the comfort they were used to. It's just heartbreaking." "Is it, Angelina?" I asked, my voice cool. "Or is it simply the natural outcome when one lives beyond one's means, entirely at someone else's expense, for years on end, while offering nothing but criticism and demands in return?" Angelina sputtered, clearly not expecting such a direct response. "Well, I never. There's no need to be so harsh. Family should support each other. Family should also respect each other, Angelina. And Toby and Clara forgot that lesson a long time ago. They are no longer my concern." I hung up before she could launch into another tirade. The grapevine, I knew, would do its work. The narrative they were trying to spin, of the cruel, ungrateful wife, was already crumbling under the weight of uncomfortable truths. Desiree, my ever-loyal informant, kept me updated with gleeful reports. "Heard from a friend of a friend," she'd say. "Toby tried to hit up old man Henderson for a loan, got laughed out of his office. Apparently, word of his financial restructuring is getting around. Or Clara was seen at the discount grocery store, looking rather less regal without her charge accounts, I hear." Each snippet of news was a small, satisfying affirmation. It wasn't just about the revenge, though I couldn't deny the cold, hard satisfaction of that. It was about justice. It was about the world righting itself, the scales rebalancing. They had taken so much from me, my peace, my confidence, years of my life. Now, they were paying the price. The comments about my empty womb, which used to cut me to the core, now felt like distant echoes from a battle I had already won. My life wasn't empty. It was full of possibilities, full of peace, full of my choices. I had my home, my career, my friends. I had myself back, and that was more than enough. They wanted an heir to secure their future in my house, with my money. Instead, they inherited the consequences of their own cruelty. And me? I inherited my life back, every square inch of it. The house settled around me like a comfortable old coat, finally fitting just right. The lingering scent of Clara's disapproval and Toby's entitlement had been completely exorcised, replaced by the aroma of fresh paint in the spare room, soon to be my new home office, and the lemon polish I used on my grandmother's antique sideboard. Desiree came over a few weeks after the eviction, armed with a bottle of ridiculously expensive champagne and a wicked grin. "To Jacqueline," she toasted, clinking her glass against mine. Queen of her castle, architect of her own peace, and master of the most satisfying karmic takedown I've ever witnessed. I laughed, taking a sip. The champagne fizzed on my tongue, a taste of victory. It wasn't about being a queen, Des. It was just about not being a prisoner anymore. "Well, you've certainly sprung yourself in style," she said, settling onto my sofa. The one Clara used to complain was too modern. "So, what's the latest from the former inmates?" "Peyton called again, actually," I said, swirling the champagne in my glass. Sounded rather sheepish. Apparently, Toby's charm is wearing thin now that he's permanently on Peyton's couch and contributing nothing but complaints and demands for sympathy. "Shocking," Desiree deadpanned. "You mean his winning personality isn't enough to sustain him without your bank account attached?" "It seems not. Peyton mentioned Toby tried to get him to co-sign a loan. Peyton, wisely, declined. Said something about Toby needing to learn to stand on his own 2 feet for a change." Desiree howled with laughter. "Oh, the irony. The man who spent a decade propped up by you is now being told to find his own footing. Beautiful. And Clara?" she pressed, her eyes gleaming. "Angelina, despite my best efforts to discourage her, still calls occasionally," I admitted. "Mostly to lament Clara's fall from grace. Apparently their dreadful little bedsit is even more dreadful than initially reported. Thin walls, noisy neighbors, and a distinct lack of anyone willing to cater to Clara's every whim." "You don't say." Angelina also let slip that Clara tried to organize a support committee among her old friends. It, didn't gain much traction. Seems her social standing took a rather significant hit once the truth about their financial situation and their treatment of me started to circulate. Funny how quickly fair-weather friends disappear when the forecast changes, isn't it? Desiree topped up our glasses. "So, they're miserable, broke, and socially ostracized. Sounds like karma delivered, with a little meticulous planning from a certain someone." I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "It does feel I won't lie, Des. There's a part of me that feels a cold, hard satisfaction in knowing they're experiencing even a fraction of the misery they put me through." "Don't you dare feel guilty about that, Jacqueline," Desiree said fiercely. "You endured years of their abuse. You gave them chance after chance. They made their bed, and now they're lying in it. A lumpy, uncomfortable, budget-rate bed, from the sounds of it." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the late afternoon sun streaming through the newly cleaned windows. The house felt calm, truly calm, for the first time in memory. "You know," I said thoughtfully, "all those years, they made me feel like my life was incomplete because I didn't have a child, that my empty womb, as Clara so delicately put it, was my greatest failure. And now," Desiree prompted gently. "And now," I said, looking around at my beautiful, peaceful home, "I realize my life isn't empty at all. It was just cluttered. Cluttered with their expectations, their demands, their negativity. Now that the clutter is gone," I took a deep breath, "now there's room for me, for what I want." The doorbell rang, making us both jump. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it to find a delivery man holding a large, extravagant bouquet of flowers. Bright, vibrant, a riot of color. "Jacqueline?" he asked. I nodded. "These are for you." There was no card. Desiree peered over my shoulder as I brought them in. Wow, secret admirer? I buried my face in the blooms, inhaling their fresh scent. I don't think so. I had a suspicion. Perhaps a peace offering from a chastened Peyton, or even, less likely, a misguided attempt at reconciliation from someone else. Or maybe, just maybe, they were from me. To me. A celebration. It didn't really matter who sent them. What mattered was the feeling they evoked. Not obligation, not a reminder of some perceived failing, but simple, uncomplicated beauty. They wanted an heir to secure their future in my house. With my money, I said, arranging the flowers in a vase. My vase. Instead, they inherited the consequences of their own cruelty. And me? I smiled at Desiree, a smile that reached my eyes and warmed me from the inside out. I inherited my life back, every square inch of it, and it's looking pretty damn good. The future stretched before me, open and bright, no longer overshadowed by their demands or defined by their narrative. I was the author of my own story now, and I couldn't wait to write the next chapter.